of police brutality against a Negro follows the same pattern. They attack you, bust you all upside your mouth, and then take you to court and charge you with assault. What kind of democracy is that? What kind of freedom is that? What kind of social or political system is it when a black man has no voice in court, has nothing on his side other than what the white man chooses to give him? My brothers and sisters, we have to put a stop to this. And it will never be stopped until we stop it ourselves. They attack the victim. And then the criminal who attacked the victim accuses the victim of attacking him. Yes, sir. This is American justice. Yes, sir. That's right. This is American democracy. Yes, and those of you who are familiar with it know that in America, democracy is hypocrisy. Right. Now, if I'm wrong, put me in jail. Right. But if you can't prove that a democracy is not hypocrisy, then don't put your hands on me.
Well, then, you are not hopeful about integration in the southern United States, even if it comes. Am I right?
That is not quite what I mean. Let me put it another way, all right? In the first place, it is not a southern problem. It's a national problem. What is happening in New Orleans today began to happen over 100 years ago when, in effect, the North, which was the government, having freed tens of thousands of illiterate black men, then made no provision for them, none whatever. None whatever. They were dumped on the body politic, and no one was responsible for them. And they were, of course, immediately political and industrial footballs for everybody. They were everybody's target. Because, after all, they had to go to school. Now, they got to go to school after Booker T. Washington in 1895, who was the architect, really, of the separate but equal principle, said, in effect, said exactly that education will not make us different, education will not give us any desire to become equal to you, that in all things social, we can be as separate as the fingers, and all things essential in mutual progress, we can be as one as the hand. Now, this idea was accepted by the nation, not only by the South.
But the South refused to provide the Negroes with the kind of educational facilities that the North more or less made available to them.
No, this is not true either. I'm afraid that is not the way it happened. That is not the way it happened. What happened is the Negro education began, and really began, in the South, and is still very largely located there. There are Negro universities in the South. There are very few Negro universities in the North because the North is technically not segregated. But it is very difficult, on the other hand, to enter. I don't mean it's difficult because the law is against it or any of these things. I mean that it is a complex of things. I grew up in Harlem. So naturally I went to Harlem schools. Had to go to Harlem schools. There were the only schools, in my neighborhood. Yeah. You grow up, if you're an American Negro, no matter where you live in the country, you are living in a segregated community. The South has, all those things we know about in the South, and in every great northern city has its ghetto. And I know how difficult it is to get out of these ghettos because I was born in one.
Well, James, are you suggesting then that, in effect, officially, in the South, there is inequality and no freedom for the Negro, and unofficially, but just as effectively, there is no freedom for the Negro in the North?
The terms are different, but the reality is the same. A boy in Birmingham is in great trouble in Birmingham. He has, in a way, one advantage, though. It's very clear in Birmingham that he can't go anywhere. A boy born in New York can go almost anywhere. Almost. This can drive you mad. This can drive you mad. You can live almost anywhere if you fight to get in. You can enter almost any nightclub. You can enter almost any bar, and nothing will happen. But this almost means that there is a bar, there is a hotel, there is a doorman, there is an elevator boy, there is somebody every day. There is that one place you cannot go, which means you enter every door on edge. Now, this is not true in the South. When a Negro boy goes in the Woolworths in the South, sits down, he knows very well what he's up against. He knows they don't want him there, and the only way that he can stay there is to say, in effect, what they have said, you know. We not only are entitled to service, but we want it.
Yes, but there's more and more of this going on in the South. Negro boys are going into Woolworths, they're going on buses, not only Negro boys, Negro girls. And they're insisting on their right to sit anywhere in a bus or sit. They're insisting on their right to sit down at the counter. They're refusing to sit in colored waiting rooms only in bus depots and things like that. They are insisting on a change in this condition.
They are indeed. Sorry.
Well, doesn't this suggest a change and progress in the relations and in the status of the Negro in these areas?
It may or may not mean that, but what it does mean, this is why the South is so panic-stricken, and essentially the country is so panic-stricken about it, it means this. The generation of boys and girls who are sitting down at those lunch counters are the first generation of Negroes in the entire history of America who were not controlled by the Americans' image of them. This is why Montgomery is so demoralized, Little Rock is so paralyzed, New Orleans, people are going mad. If you have, I was in Montgomery after the bus boycott, after it had succeeded, which outlawed segregation on the buses. Now, Montgomery is really, after all, a rather small southern town. If you can find anywhere in the deep South Negroes, the South has been saying for generations, they know the Negro. You would find them in that town. There was not a Negro in that town, really, essentially, who was not working with some white man. There was really no middle class. There were no outside agitators. These people walked. These people terrified, the town is still terrified, because they don't, not even on the obvious level about violence, but if they're not who I thought they were, who are they?
Well, who did the whites, Southern and Northern think the Negroes were? What is this image that you were talking
This is precisely what is so difficult to get down to, but let me try to put it this way. What is he? I don't know what white people see, when they look at a Negro anymore. But I do know very well that I realized when I was very young that whatever he was looking at, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. It was something he was afraid of. It was something to which he was attracted or which he found repulsive, but it wasn't me. I was not a man. Now, this image, I don't know what this image is, but it has something to do. It has something to do, I'm convinced of this, with the Puritan God. It has something to do with a peculiar and, I believe, absolutely bankrupt morality under which we all are suffering. The one person who was outside this constriction in fact and historically and in life was this pagan, this black pagan.
Who was brought over
as a chattel. That's right. Who was brought over as a chattel to God's country. Now, somewhere, I think in order to deal with it all, one's got to go all the way back to the beginning and try to imagine, I don't know if this can be done, but I think one's got to try, what it must have been like then. Because then, after all, he really was a pagan. He had nothing to do, not only with the puritanical standards of America, but with the European tradition out of which Americans came. He really was a stranger. He really did frighten them. They did not know what to do with him. And they still don't. And in a way, the sexual legends which have sprung up around the figure of the Negro in America contain somehow the key, the truth about our situation. It is still true that the question which ends the argument, stops the argument, is would you let your sister marry one? It is still a question to which, in effect, the country has found no answer.
Do you think that there is this pretense? The thing that impresses me while I try to understand the problem of the relationship of white and Negro in the United States, which seems to me a very crucial problem indeed, is the earnest desire of what I can only call Christian-thinking Americans to remedy this terrible, enduring wrong, to find some way to make expiation, to find some way to give the Negro equality as a citizen of that country. Surely this is the real significance, for example, behind this whole struggle for integration.
I quite agree with that. I quite agree with that. But in order for this to be achieved, there is one thing which has to be done which is not being done. And that is this. It is not a question of giving the Negro equality. That is not really the question. The question is why you haven't.
Why you haven't?
Yes. Why doesn't he have it yet? This question is important. This question implies, how can I put this, that in order to deal with it, really deal with it, you have to first deal with yourself. I know a great many very well-meaning and very admirable people who work, let us say, in settlement houses, all up and down, you know. Now, with very rare exceptions, they do not really make contact with the people they are trying to help precisely because they think they are trying to help them. And the problem is more crucial and more subtle than that. A Negro boy dealing with a white school teacher doesn't want to be helped that way. He wants to be accepted. He has to be accepted as a boy, as a person.
As a human being.
That's right, before anything can be done with him. He cannot be handled as a problem. It's not a question of giving the Negro equality. It's a question of making the country grow up. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, but do I draw the conclusion from this fairly, that what you're saying is that in some peculiar way, there is a need on the part of the American to feel, the white American, to feel that the Negro American is a dependent, that there is a need to put the American Negro in a place apart?
Mm-hmm. That is one of the things I mean. I also mean to imply something else. Let me put it personally. It's the safest way to put it. There is something in me, for example, you know, sometimes, and certainly when I was much younger, which resented the assumption on which all these things are based. It assumes that you have something I want. It somehow assumes that I have not been to your wedding and haven't made my own judgments about the marriage. What makes you think, after all? I've often felt like saying that I want to get into the white man's world. Look at it.
But you are part of that world.
Oh, of course. Everyone is. There's no way, you know. But I am trying to point out this, that there really isn't on the basis of it. Just looking at the evidence. Any reason for white people to assume the Negroes want to be like them. In fact, on the basis of the evidence, one will conclude that anybody in his right mind would do his best not to become like that.
Well, the situation has changed in this respect, surely. That whereas before, your American Negro depended on the NCAAP.
NAACP.
I'm sorry, NAACP, to conduct legal battles for him on a very small level.
And that's much more complex than that.
Well, if I may just finish this point, that whereas before he depended upon that kind of organization, or he accepted the Booker T. Washington proposition, give me equal but separate facilities and I will be happy. Today, he will not accept.
Cannot.
Cannot accept that.
Cannot.
Isn't this a qualitative change in the entire situation?
Yes, but you must remember what I'm trying to convey. Because I'm not arguing that the situation has changed. I'm not even arguing, you know, the progress has been made. I'm not questioning the goodwill, you know, of the people who are doing it or helping to do it. This is not the question. What I'm trying to get at is this. All right, that's true. But you, oneself, the boy, the girl, no, is in fact living in a house that he can't move out of because he's black.
But there is surely an end to these wretched